Worshipful Gregory Gabriel, past master, Pasadena Lodge 272, and he's currently the Venerable Master of the Pasadena Lodge of Perfection 2020 and the Inspector at Large for Division 7 of Grand Lodge of California. So he's going to be speaking tonight. His presentation is called Masonic, Believe It or Not. So let's give a warm welcome to Worshipful Greg, and the floor is yours, sir.
Give you a little quick background of me and my writings before we get into it. I've been writing for our Lodge Trestle Board on a monthly basis now for probably almost 20 years. And writing little articles, some Masonic, I may get into a, Masonic astronauts or something like that, actors. I just did one on Royal Dano the other day for this month's, and then I get into some weird stuff that has nothing to do with Masonry whatsoever, like weird laws that are still on the books. Did you know in California it is illegal to shoot a whale from a moving vehicle? Okay, I know where that came from, but apparently it was a sport back in the early 1900s, and it's still on the books. So I write stuff. What my idea is to capture the reader, bring them in, get them kind of away from all that others. I don't want to say boring stuff that you normally see in Masonic articles, but we get a lot of that. So I want to go off the beaten path. Tonight is going to be that kind of an evening. I have two Masonic, believe it or not. That's my reverb. And I hope you enjoy them. The first is going to deal with this little item right here. And that's why I said if you're into canning, you might be interested in this. This is a ball mason jar. And little things like this always pique my curiosity, because a mason jar, is it Masonic? Well, we're going to answer that tonight, along with a few other questions. So we'll find out, is the ball mason jar Masonic? I know a lot of you, you put your pins in here from all the past Grand Masters you've met and all that, and it fills it up. Some of you wear them on your lapels, which are out to here now, if you can see that, because you wear all your pins, but that's okay too. Well, let's talk about this. Okay. In the 1800s, canning was very, very popular. It was the only way to preserve items for travel, for the home, and whatever. Meats were dried, smoked, and so forth. Vegetables, fruits and stuff were preserved in cans, bottles like this. And once placed in there, a pectin, or like a wax of some type, was placed over that. And that was the sealant to keep the air out and keep the food from spoiling. And then it would last for quite a while. The problem with that was, once you broke that seal, it was a pain to reseal it again. And basically you had to use the contents of the jar within the next couple of days, or all the food's gonna spoil and you need to get rid of it. Well, in 1852, a man by the name of John Landis, you guessed it, Mason, received patent number 22186 for a new design for the canning jar. What he did was he added this ridge that you see around it here, and since he was a tinsmith by nature, that was his business, that was his trade, he came up with this. A flat disc for a lid that fit on top, just like the pectin would have done to seal, and a screw-on cap that had a rubberized ring in it to seal it and keep out the moisture, the air, bacteria, and so forth. And the idea of this little miracle was you could unscrew it, use what you needed, screw the lid back on, and you could keep it fresh far longer than the pectin seal would have ever lasted. Pretty ingenious for the time. He also went on to receive patent number 102913. Can you guess what that might have been? You use it every day at home. The screw-on salt shaker lid. He just took his design one step further, punched holes in it, screwed it in, and he had a shaker, okay? So he had a lot of good things going for him. He was quite the inventor. Unfortunately, he was a terrible businessman. And even though he had patents on these designs, and when he went to the Ball Brothers glass works to make the first jars, he didn't really follow through on his patent. He didn't get a contract with him. He didn't ask for royalties. He didn't do anything except help make this a reality for the rest of the world. Other companies like Kerr, who also made bottles at that time, started duplicating that. And a war began between all these bottle companies to see who really had the patent rights and the design rights on that particular type of sealant. It actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in 1876, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that that Mason's patent had been abandoned to the public because he never followed through on his contracts, on royalties, or anything else. It's like, I did it, and here it is to the world. So Ball became the major manufacturer of that time. And as it turned out, John Landis Mason, who had 6 kids, 6 daughters at the time, and lived in New York City, died in poverty in 1902. Was he a Mason? That's the question we want to answer. And the answer is no, he was not. Yet, my brethren, there is Masonic significance here. Because the Ball brothers, who made this jar so popular and still do today, this patent is still used today, turns out that they were brothers of the craft. There were 5 brothers originally that Mason dealt with, 2 of which, Frank and George, both were raised in Muncie Lodge number 433 in Muncie, Indiana in 1898. Both brothers served as president of the company, and brother George became chairman of the board. They were also both active Scottish Rite Masons, and Seb, guess what? They were also members of Murat Shrine, and very popular and very active over there. They were also great philanthropists. They made a lot of money on this. And they were local, they were very active in community affairs, and they gave a lot of money and a lot of help to the community, one of which they bought a lot of land in Indiana, where the company eventually moved to. And they started what was called the Indiana State Normal School. I love that name, the Normal School. Is there an abnormal school? Haven't looked that one up yet. But anyway, the locals began to call it, can anybody take a guess? Ball State, sound familiar? And in 1922, the Indiana legislature officially changed the name of the Indiana State Normal School to Ball State as we know it today. The next president of the company, Edmund F. Ball, joined the same lodge his uncles did, Muncie Lodge number 433 in 1927, and he too was very active in the Scottish Rite, and he continued the great philanthropy that the company began. Later on in the late 50s, when he stepped down as president, the company was bought out by a giant concern from out of the country and is run by them today, but they are still giving works to and money to many philanthropic organizations. And so, yes, my brethren, when you see one of these and it says, Mason jar, there is a Masonic factor to that. So that's your first official Masonic, believe it or not. All right. Any questions on that? Everybody happy? We still there?
If anybody wants to unmute and raise their hand and one at a time before we go on to the next topic that he's going to bring, you can unmute yourself at this time and then mute again later when you're done speaking. Go ahead, Brother David.
We used to have a normal school here downtown LA where the main library is. That library was put in back in the 20s, but prior to that, it was the Los Angeles Normal School. So we had one here.
Ah, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. Anybody else? All right. This next one, I think you're going to really enjoy. Let me get, there we go. This, now I understand last week we talked, your guest speaker talked about tavern lodges, correct? And I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit, but I'm not going to talk about lodges. I'm not going to talk about taverns. I'm going to talk about what you enjoy inside the tavern. But I'm going to start off with a little background first so I give you an idea of where we're headed here. So with this Masonic, believe it or not, we're going to talk about a man who was a Mason. So we'll get that right off the bat there. And that, of course, let me get my notes here, was Brother Ernest Shackleton. Now, Ernest Shackleton, if for those of you who don't recall your history, was an explorer in the early 1900s who was destined to find the South Pole, and had several expeditions to the Antarctic. And I'm going to talk particularly about his second expedition, because that's where our story gets interesting. The second expedition, called the Nimrod expedition, because of the ship that they sailed on, was called the Nimrod, set sail in August 1907 from England, and went to New Zealand, where it was restocked, and then went from there down to the Antarctic to set up base camp and then start the expedition. They wound up in the barrier later known as Ross Ice Shelf in early January of 1908. They set up which was a little bit further than they wanted to. They wanted to go further inland as far as they could get, but the winter came a little bit early that year to the Antarctic, and there was a lot of sea ice. It was pretty well frozen, and the Nimrod couldn't handle that, so they had to back off, hit a little north, and then start their base camp. They set it up, and on January 25th, the ship was sent off back to its base in New Zealand. On February 3rd, Shackleton decided not to waste much time, but moved the camp over to Camp Royds, which was a little bit further south, which helped them cut off a little time in their expedition. But basically, around that point, mid-February, they decided to head out for the South Pole. Now, there were two expeditions actually that happened. The Southern expedition, which Brother Shackleton was in charge of, was to find the actual center of the South Pole. The second expedition, what they called the Northern expedition, was to find the magnetic South Pole. So they set off in different directions at different times. When during the expedition, to the South Pole, which included Frank Wild and Ernest Joyce as part of the team, they came across a mountain, Mount Erebus, which was 12,450 feet high. And when you're in freezing cold, to climb that mountain is something awesome, especially in those days. They didn't have oxygen tanks. You know, clothing was skins and so forth. It was pretty tough to climb that, but they did. And along the way, they planted the British flag wherever they could, claiming that territory for the king. In winter 1908, they decided to press onward, looking for the southernmost point that they could get to. By October 1908, Shackleton calculated the return distance to the pole as 1,494 miles. miles. And his initial plan was take 91 days for the return journey to get back. He figured it would be easier to get back than to get there because he was going uphill, getting to the South Pole. Everything was downhill, and they could slide down on their sleds coming back. The party struggled quite a bit. It wasn't an easy journey at all. And along the way, they planted little depots of food. So on the return trip back, they would know where the stashes were. They could sit, they could relax a little bit, get nourished, and make it back. Now remember, they had a timeline. The captain of the Nimrod was ordered to be in the bay by March 1st of 1909. And if the crew wasn't there, the parties weren't there, he was ordered to sail that evening with or without them to be presumed dead or lost. So they knew that they had to get back. They went as far as they could go. It was a harsh winter for them. And Shackleton wrote, "We had shot our bolt, and the tail is 88 degrees, 23 minutes south of the geographical north, which is about 97.5 miles short of the center of the South Pole." So they came pretty close, but it was, for government work, I guess that's okay, right? They planted the British flag. There was a small ceremony. They honored King Edward VII and turned back to come back. The party returned in about 73 days, which was pretty quick to get back. But it wasn't without problems. Along the way, two of the members of his four-man party became very ill, and they actually had to leave them behind because they had to make sure that they were over by the original base camp, so the Nimrod would find them and continue with their journey. And it turned out they made it on February 28th of 1909, the day before the Nimrod was to set sail. So Shackleton was able to force the delay of the launching of the ship, and they were until the rest of the party joined him, and they were then jumped on the ship and came back quickly. On the northern end, the northern expedition went and they did actually find the geographic magnetic South Pole on January 17th, 1909, and claimed that also for the British Empire. Now, I didn't want to give a whole lot of the background of the story because it's not what I'm really leading up to here. What I'm leading up to is that Shackleton was an interesting fellow. He was gruff and kind of a manly man, and he really knew his stuff, and he commanded the loyalty of his crew. But he did it in such a way that it wasn't mean or overbearing, but he was like one of the guys. And if you look at pictures of the expedition parties, they look like they were in their 50s or 60s, and they were all really in their late 20s and early 30s, but they were pretty worn, rugged guys. Shackleton knew that the way to his crew was to keep them happy, and the way to keep Englishmen happy was to have something like this on hand, Scotch. He ordered 25 cases of Scotch that were specially made just for him in this expedition. I'm sorry. Let me find my note here really quick. What happened was, it was a very interesting concoction that they came up with, and it was a rare old Highland malt whiskey. 24 cases were ordered and came down with the Nimrod and placed in the warming hut. And as it turned out, 3 cases mysteriously were left behind, buried in the snow and ice. Nobody knew exactly why that was. speculation was that maybe Shackleton put them there for a triumphal return and victory party. Some say that it might have been one of his own other men who was actually quite a lush and maybe was keeping it for himself. Regardless of the case, in 2007, a journey to the South Pole was made by the Royal Geographic Society to find the original base camp of Shackleton, to reconstruct the original base camp, and to see how close he actually came to the center of the poles, because there were some discrepancies by line of sight and other things. So they were really curious as to how close he really got. While they were excavating the site, they came across 3 cases of this scotch, perfectly preserved in the ice. And they thought, oh, that's a pretty good find. So they took the bottles and they took samples. And they did that by placing a really fine needle in the cork, because back then it was just a cork with a wax seal on it. And they withdrew as much as they could, and then they reburied some of them. One case actually went to the Royal Museum, and the other case went to the manufacturer for analysis, along with the samples that they took at that time. The third case was left in the snow as a memorial and tribute to Shackleton and his men. As it turned out, this now 100-year-old scotch, frozen in the ice, which was originally a 5 to 15-year scotch blend, was quite unique. And when they deconstructed it, they found out some very interesting things. It was a malt, not a grain scotch. It was made in sherry casks made from American oak. The water came from Loch Ness, and the peat to smoke the barley came from a remote island known as the Orkney Islands, and it was very rare to be using that. It doesn't give a very peaty taste, apparently, and so they were very confused why this ancient 100-year-old scotch didn't have a real peaty taste, which was common in that time, and that is why. So, with that, the scotch was reconstructed from various blends of scotch from 15 to 25 years old, and blended and came up with what we have today, this bottle of Shackleton's, okay, blended malt Scotch whiskey. And it's based on the McKinley Distillery's original 25 cases that were taken aboard the Nimrod. You can buy this. It goes for $35 a bottle. I think Bevmo has it and a few other places, but it's out there. And it has, I'll tell you, it's actually done very well at whiskey tasting contests and so forth. It has a nose of vanilla, toffee apple, cinnamon, and ginger, a taste of dark sugar, sweet dried fruits, glazed pineapple, and with a finish of mulled wine, praline chocolate, and a final whisper of bonfire smoke. It received 5 stars out of 5 stars, so not a bad whiskey. So, Brother Shackleton, dapper looking guy. Here's a picture of him right there if you've never seen him. Pretty classy looking. And he received the Knight of the British Empire for his efforts, and went on to eventually did another expedition to find he did find the South Pole, and was finally gave up after that and said, I'm done with this. So to Brother Shackleton and all my brothers out there, I drink to you. Are there any questions?
That was outstanding. I think we have time for a third one if you want to add a third thing in there. It's up to you. If anybody has a question, raise your hand, and maybe we can encourage illustrious brother, Worshipful Gabriel, to give us a third or a fifth. Just kidding.
Well, you caught me a little off guard with that. Let me think here. Okay, let's, you know what? We can talk about Royal Dano for a minute, since I just did an article on him. How many of you remember Royal Dano? Anybody remember him? He was past master of Pacific Palisades Lodge, which is now part of Santa Monica Palisades. He was a character actor in the, and this is all off the top of my head, guys, so work with me here. He was a character actor beginning in 1950. Quite a dapper-looking young man at that time. He was about 6 feet 3 inches tall. Had a very unique voice. When you heard him, you knew who he was. No matter what kind of costume he was in, no matter what kind of makeup they threw on him, you could tell Royal Dano from anywhere. He was in some big movies. He was in an Alfred Hitchcock thriller. He was also in a some other big time movies. But he did most of his business were small parts. And what got me going on it was I like to watch The Rifleman. Great, that series. Chuck Connors is a man's man right there. With that rifle and everything. Quite a guy. Quite a sports hero too. If you ever look up Chuck Connors, he was he lettered in basketball, football, and baseball. Went on to sign contracts with the major leagues for both football and baseball, and was only active a short time, but he was quite a guy. But anyway, getting back to the Rifleman, I was watching, and of course I hear that voice, and I look, and there's Royal. And Royal I had the pleasure to meet on several occasions during my span as a Mason. The first time was as a young Mason. I think it was at the 1983 when I was at the Southern California Past Masters Association. He was there, and along with Brother Ernest Borgnine. And I've seen him several times since then. He was also on one of our, back in the 90s when we had a Rose Parade float. Grand Lodge had Rose Parade floats through the 90s. And he was dressed as Lincoln and wearing a Masonic apron, which was a little weird, but since Abe wasn't a Mason, but that's okay. We gave him one for the ride down Colorado Boulevard, and I got to talk to him on New Year's Eve there. He actually was at Grand Lodge one year, and they called him on stage to do the Gettysburg Address in his Lincoln voice. Now, what's interesting about the Lincoln voice was he played in a movie called Honest Abe, where he played Lincoln. And it was such a stirring role, and he did it so well that Walt Disney himself thought, this man is the epitome of what everyone thinks Abe Lincoln would have looked like, would have sounded like, would have acted like. And so in 1963, when the great moments with Mr. Lincoln attraction was at the New York World's Fair, Disney decided that this is the man I want to be the voice for that show. So he said, get Royal at any cost. I don't care. I want him. So Royal did. He went, and he had this little script that he read to start off the show, and then he went into doing the Gettysburg Address. Very stirring, very well done, and quite moving. And I remember when I took my kids years and years ago, probably almost 30 years ago now, to Disneyland. I took them to see that attraction. They go, "Why? Why are we going to see this?" I go, "Wait, you'll see why." And when Lincoln stood up and started his speech, I go, "I know the guy that does that voice. He's really a cool guy." And they go, "Oh, okay." So that piqued their interest into what was going on. Well, that that ride has changed, that attraction has changed a few times in the past few years, but they brought it back. It's now the Hall of Presidents, but that soundtrack that he recorded in '63 is still the one they use today, digitally enhanced, to be the voice of Lincoln. And so it's, you know, it's timeless. It'll probably always be there. What a tribute to this man. And it's at not only at Disneyland, but at Disney World, and actually at all the Disney parks. They're listening to one of our brothers, Royal Dano. He died a few years ago. Actually, he was only like in his early 60s when he passed, but he was quite a guy, and did, I believe, over 150 appearances in various television and movies, mostly Westerns, and he usually played either the bad guy or the heavy or the, you know, the drunken cowboy or something along those lines if he wasn't doing the Lincoln role. So watch for it sometime, and look up Royal Dano. It'll give his filmography, and you know, you can if you got Hulu or YouTube or whatever, you can watch some of this stuff and see Brother Dano in action. So Royal, quite a guy, and he'll be missed. This is to Royal.
Hey, do you mind if I ask you a quick question? Since you will transition, because you mentioned Disneyland. Is there a Club 33? Do you know anything about that?
I know a lot about Club 33. What would you like to know?
Well, this is Masonic, believe it or not. So leave it up to you.
All right. Does the 33, I know everyone says, well, there's 33 degrees in Masonry. Does that have anything to do with it? I can tell you this, probably nobody at Disneyland today will know that for sure. Walt probably does, but he took it to his grave. He never told anybody. If you look at the numbering along that particular street corridor, it's odd numbers, and the 33 would just fit right in between the other, where the other attractions are. So it might be chance. I think, personally, I would think that Walt and many of his staff were Masons, so it wouldn't surprise me if that was intentionally put there as a secret, because, again, if you don't know what that door means or where it goes, it's pretty baffling to most people. It does lead to a very nice restaurant. You have to go up a stairwell, and it's actually on the second level, kind of where the Blue Bayou is overlooking that, but you don't see the Blue Bayou, but you for the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but it's up in that area up there. A lot of club members are big corporations, and I think it's like $10,000 a year to be a member, but that includes tickets to Disneyland, free parking, plus, and then you have to pay for your meal once you get there as well. So it is, however, the only place in Disneyland Park where you can get alcohol. You have to go outside the park to get alcohol anywhere else. So if you want a good stiff drink, you got to be a member of Club 33 to enjoy it. But that's Club. Yes.
That's actually where I got engaged.
At Club 33?
At Club 33. It was the
you could probably tell us more about it. Yeah.
hardest series of favors I ever had to pull.
Yeah.
So many bottles of booze for so many people down the chain for me to get invited up there. But you no longer get tickets to the park. I think
you don't.
I think it's a little higher than $10,000 a year now.
It probably is. Yeah. It probably is. That was the last time I knew somebody who belonged to it. That was a while ago. So, yeah, you're probably right.
I think you're looking at about a 20-ish year wait list to get the honor to pay $10,000 a year.
Before, there's a waiting list. Absolutely.
What was your experience?
But yeah, quite a deal.
Brother Matt, what was your experience being there? Tell me, was it crowded? You have to wait once you're in there, or is it?
No. It's not crowded at all. You have a time that you go. They actually moved the door to it. The door is now across from a little jewelry store next to Pirates of the Caribbean. And enter through a nondescript door, and there's sort of like a garden waiting area with a spiral staircase leading up to the restaurant. That can seat 50 people to 100 people if it's filled, but they only seat each table. They set about an hour between each table as you're sat. So everyone's staggered. We were one of like second or third tables that went into the restaurant, and one table is only served for dinner one time a night. So we were there for like 5 hours to get through dinner. It was great. My wife loved it. It's one of those places, the moment you move, someone swoops in, picks up your napkin, resets your whole place setting, folds something fancy for you if you run to the restroom to wash your hands or anything. But food was fine. Not the best, but great.
Now, how long, I got a question. How long that restaurant has been at Disneyland?
I think it opened there.
So my question to Greg will be is that...
Hold on. It did not open there. What I heard was that Walt Disney was inspired by the 1964 World's Fair, where they had a special area where they could wine and dine sponsors and so forth, and he wanted to do something similar. So I believe that Disneyland predated that by at least 10 years.
1967. That's when it was made. Okay.
So
My question will be is that do you think that was a place that they were having any Masonic meetings?
No.
That will be a question to Greg.
Not that.
No.
I don't know.
No.
Mike may know.
No, but I can tell you that, yeah, in connection to the park itself, like you said, the park was open probably more than 10 years, because that section of the park wasn't opened until the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and that whole Louisiana Bayou thing was built. So it was built at the same time the attraction and everything else was. And like you said, that was probably, like you said, 67, 68, somewhere in there.
Didn't Disney have a private dining room above Main Street Disney when it opened, though? I thought that
He had, well, Walt had Walt did have a private office. If you look, in fact, that's interesting. When you go to Disneyland and you go to where the fire station is located, it's, as you walk in, it's going to be on your left-hand side of Main Street. The fire station is there, and above the firehouse, you'll see a window with a light on, and that light burns 24/7 in honor of Walt. It used to go on if you saw the light on when Walt was alive. If the light was on, meant he was in the park. And it was his private office. There was a dining room in there, a waiting room, lounge area, because his wife and kids would go with him. They would hang out up there. Then they would go into the park, whatever. He'd bring VIPs with him. They would be up there. It's air conditioned, very nice. You got a lovely view of Main Street and the town square and all that. Yes, that was his private location, and it is still used today for VIPs and others. But that light is on, so when you see it, you'll know that is the window that Walt used to look at as people would stroll through the park.
Does every Disney location have that kind of club, or is it just?
Well, as my understanding is, most of the clubs or most of the restaurants in Orlando and stuff serve alcohol. So it's only Disneyland that doesn't serve alcohol in all of its locations. But the other parks were designed to do that. It had to do with originally Walt didn't want alcohol in there because it was supposed to be a family-oriented thing. But as in '71 when Orlando opened, it was more of like hey, we need something more to keep for the attraction for adults. This is big time money we're making here. So we really need to have restaurants that serve alcohol. And there are several restaurants that don't, if you want to keep that family orientation. But it's not like Disneyland. Disneyland is a very unique location. and very well preserved the way Walt wanted it to be reserved.
I believe that that he died 6 months before it actually opened. Somebody can confirm that.
I didn't hear that. He what?
I believe he passed away before it was actually open. I think by 6 months before it opened.
You're talking about Orlando.
The Club 33 here in LA, I think, right?
Oh, could be.
So he never saw it open, I don't think.
He didn't. I think his brother Roy was the one who inaugurated it, as I recall. I had to look that one up. My dad actually met Roy Disney once, way back when in Pasadena, and they were talking about it. And, kind of an interesting guy Roy is. And by the way, if you're talking about Disney, if you guys really like Disneyana, there's a place, if you go to the Griffith Park, where the Life steamers are. If you know where that's at, the Life steamer trains, the little scaled down trains you can ride. The third Sunday of every month, that location is open, and you can ride the trains if you want. It's all free of charge. But what is unique about it is the Disney barn is located there. And this barn was originally in Walt's Homely Hills house. Like I say, he lived in Homely Hills, and it was in the backyard, and that's where he actually built scale models of the railroad trains that you now see circling Disneyland. There's scale models in there. There's also a lot of first editions of prototypes of what Thunder Mountain looks like. It's full scale. I mean, it's not full scale, but it's a scale model of it. There's also what the first monorail looked like, and all kinds of things. It's really unique, and they give tours of that. And there's pictures of Walt. I think they actually have a picture of Walt when he was in his DeMolay robe, because he was a DeMolay in Kansas City, Missouri, and he had his mustache back then in his teens, believe it or not. And it's fascinating to go see. I've been fortunate. I know the guys who are Life steamers over there, and we actually get to go in and check it even on off days. But even the architecture of the building is just how Disneyland was made. If you look at the front of the building, it sags a little in the middle because it's supposed to look like a barn, but that sag was intentional. It's not an old building. It's really new, but it's constructed so it looks old and looks like a barn from the Midwest. I mean, Walt left nothing to detail, everything to detail. It was it's flawless. It's fascinating what he did, and the stuff that's in there is just unbelievable. Take your kids, you'll love it.
Yeah, we have. If you guys know Brother Worshipful Steve Harris, he has a train at the Life steamer. As many for Encino Shrine Club, every year they have a little picnic or gathering for the families there. And if you've never been there, I mean, I don't care if you're 80 years old or if you're 8 years old, it's fun. And yeah, Walt Disney died on December 15, 1966. So that will make it about 5 months before the Club 33 or Restaurant 33 was open.
Yeah. About the train too. If one of the original mail car that used to circle Disneyland on the rails over there, it's the first quarter of it's a mail car, and then the second half, the second 3/4 of it is like a for seating, right? And it used to go around Disneyland. That is also there, and I'll let you in on a secret. There have never been any weddings on the property there. We snuck in and we did a wedding there. So, but when you're the president of the steamers, you got a key, right? And we actually performed. I was very honored to perform a wedding for a DeMolay buddy of mine who was also who I worked with on the sheriff's department. His bride also was a dispatcher for the department, and they asked me to officiate. And we had the ceremony. The meeting was originally the meet and greet was in the barn, and we walked over to the the railroad car where I officiated with a big red barrel that said Danger Dynamite on it was our little altar, and the bride walked down the center of the train. It was really a lot of fun, and we had a great time with that. And then we went to the Tam O'Shanter for the reception dinner afterwards. So there's never been a wedding there, but
Do we have pictures? Do we have pictures from the wedding?
Oh yeah, we do.
Did you have your
And
singleton
you know what?
Malta?
And it was done. The wedding was December 1st, so they had already decorated the barn with a Christmas tree and so forth.
Oh my gosh.
And it was very, very nice. I'll send you some pictures later on. You'll enjoy it. It was really cool. I had a great time.
Worshipful Gregory, did you have your singleton Malta at the wedding?
I did not. You know what? I didn't. No, I didn't have it at that time. This was just given to me probably a year ago.
I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, but you know, it was. But we had a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a good night. So I hope you all you had enjoyed this. We had a good time. I enjoyed it. We want to do it again sometime. Even after your Fireside Chat series is over, you know, I'm always available.